Hi, I'm Carl, and in this video we're going to have a look at questions 14 to 17 of section 3 of the pink booklet. So this is a question about drug composition. So we're given 3 different substances and we're told through this diagram what sort of emulsion it would form. So there's a drug that's very lipophilic and it needs to have some other substances added to it to help it get absorbed properly. And so we have these 3 different substances here, and this diagram shows us how increasing different levels of them can affect the emulsion that's formed. And there's 3 types of emulsion, and that are represented by 3 regions here. So X shows a macro emulsion, Y is a nano emulsion, and Z is a micro emulsion. Great, so let's go through first of all how you read one of these diagrams. It seems a little bit confusing. So usually with this sort of thing, obviously, say there's 30% tioxopol. On a normal graph, you just sort of read up vertically from 30% and you get your values. But instead, we have these 2 lines that go out here. I think the easiest way to read this sort of diagram, and we'll go through it in the next question, is looking at the regions that these lines reveal. So let's look at point 1. Because 14 says the formulation represented at point 1 contains what? So point 1, you can see it's in region Z, so it's part of a microemulsion. Let's look at each of these different components in turn. We'll start off with tioxopol because I think it's the easiest to read. And we can see that there is a line that comes up from that axis near point 1. And we can see that it's going to be on the right hand side of this line, which means it's going to be less than 30% tioxopol. The next line we might want to look at is this one, because it says it's going to be at least more than 15% tioxopol. So what that does, it means that we can get rid of answer B straight away because it's got less than 15% tioxopol, and because point 1 lies between these 2 lines, that wouldn't be possible. So if we've got our 4 options here, we can rule out B straight away. Okay, so the next we could look at is TPGS. And we can see that there are these 2 lines here that can bound point 1. We've got one here which says that point 1 must have at least 15% TGPS. And this line here says there's got to be less than 30. So we know that the amount of TPGS at point 1 is going to be between 15 and 30. Now, looking at this, it's difficult to say sort of where it is on that, and it wouldn't be that clear to estimate where it would be, but we know if it's going to be between 15 and 30% TPGS, we can rule out C and D straight away. So that means we're left with answer A. But just to confirm it, let's look at the last one, which is DOCNA. So from this, we've got a couple of lines we can look at, but this one's the best one. So we've got a line coming down from 15 here, and that tells us there's got to be less than 15% DOCNA. A is the only answer that allows for that, and therefore A has to be the final answer for question 14. Great. 15 says formulation P contains 15% tioxopol and Q contains 30% tioxopol. So these are these 2 lines here that I was talking about before. If that's the case, which one of the following is true? So at 15% tioxopol, we've got P, and at 30% we've got Q. If you follow this line up, P has to end up in this purple region, meaning that it's going to form a microemulsion. And then Q can be passing through this X region. And then, this Y region on its way up to Z. And so it will also form a microemulsion. So because of the way it's worded, I think it can be a little bit tricky to understand this one, because line Q here, which is this one here, is passing through regions Y and Z. So in theory, it could be a nano emulsion or a microemulsion for Y. So to say it must be a microemulsion is going to be wrong. So that's how we can rule out B. A obviously could be right if you read the first part of it. It says P must be a microemulsion. And because it goes up into the Z region, we know that's going to be true. But it says that Q must be a macroemulsion. And because it's nowhere near this X region here, is certainly not going to be the case. If we look at B, then it says P must be a macroemulsion, which obviously is untrue. And then Q must be a microemulsion. And it's that must be that I want to point out, because it could also be a nanoemulsion, because it's going through this Y region at some point too. So that means our answer could either be C or D. C says both P and Q could be microemulsions, and that's true because there is a region there in Z where these lines both exist. So the answer, so C could work, but just to rule it out, D says both P and Q could be macroemulsions, and that's not going to be the case, given that X region doesn't have the right concentrations. So if we were to go through them all, we would see that 15 must be C, just following those lines up and saying what regions they go into and being careful with the way the question's worded. Okay, so 16 says formulations containing at least 40% DOCNA can be what? So DOCNA is this one on the left hand side. So if we imagined a line here roughly, which would be about 40%, what does that tell us about what it could be? So looking at the different options we have here, 16A is microemulsion. So of course microemulsions is going to be group Z, and if we were to follow this line all the way down, it wouldn't interact with group Z at all. So it couldn't be a microemulsion. What about macroemulsions? Well, it goes straight into zone X, and so macroemulsions are possible. And if you follow this line all the way down, it doesn't cross Y at all, and therefore it must be a macroemulsion, meaning the answer for 16 is going to be B. But just to rule them out, C is nano-sized emulsions, which of course is zone Y here, and we've just spoken about how that wouldn't be possible because this line wouldn't go through Y at all. And then D says microemulsions or macroemulsions. So microemulsions are group Z, and this line doesn't head towards Z at all. So the answer definitely for this one is going to be B. Finally, we've got question 17, which is which of the following is closest to the maximum proportion of DOCNA in the formulation that could form a microemulsion. So a microemulsion is group Z, and if we were to have a look at this line here, this is the 30% DOCNA line, and we can see that it roughly just touches the edge of the Z zone here, and that's going to be the microemulsion limit. So if it's going to be less than 30% DOCNA, then there's a chance it could be a microemulsion. So I think that's closest to the maximum proportion, because of course if we went past that in this direction, if we move that line in this direction, we'd be missing the Z zone completely. So the maximum value is going to be around 30%. So that means that the answer for 17 is also going to be B as well. So that's a pretty confusing diagram, but once you know how those sort of angled lines work, it's quite easy to understand. So I hope that helped. Thanks for watching.